Why was Cormac McCarthy such a reclusive author? And to answer that question, I'm first going to ask a question to you, and that is, what would you do if all of your artistic dreams came true today? If all those 3 a.m. fantasies about you becoming a famous writer just manifested out of nowhere? How would you react? Would you DM all of your hot followers on Instagram and just hook up with them all? Would you buy a new Porsche 911 or some other ridiculous car? Would you become reclusive? Would you do more readings? Would you be a public figure? What would you do? And of course, let's just be honest. You've thought about this before. One of my favorite fantasies is thinking about getting invited to speak at the university I went to graduate school at and going back there and just cussing everyone out and telling them that they creatively and academically stunted me, and that if there are any students out there, they need to leave immediately. And so now returning back to Cormac, what did Cormac imagine when he was writing his first three crazy novels? What was he thinking when they were selling under 2,000 copies and he didn't have enough money for toothpaste and he was living on a renovated barn on a pig farm? Maybe the pig farm inspiration made Cormac think that writing about a necrophiliac was going to change his artistic career. But one delusion that all artists have is that they need to write the best selling book or become a professor to be able to get all the rewards they imagine in their brains. But I know so many guys who are ugly, who are pieces of shit, who have absolutely no special attributes, and they date a ton of very beautiful women. We are talking about money and gaining fame. There are a ton of easier methods to gain fame and money than trying to become a literary fiction author. You could focus on business and make a bunch of money and then just pump up your mediocre books to the top of the New York Times bestseller list, and no one's really going to question you. People online will, but the general person you tell them be like, wow, that's insane. You could start a booktube channel right now and talk to more people than any venue that a workshop would hold for a public seminar. More people are going to see this video in a day than if your favorite author came into your town and said, "Hey, I'm going to hold the talk at the public library." So what is the real dream? What are we actually looking for? What was Cormac looking for at the start of his writing career? And once we answer that, then we can see why he became reclusive later on. Because there's this myth that Cormac didn't like to talk to people. But I have known people who've seen Cormac in public and walked up to him and talked to him about anything except writing. They would ask about physics and he would sit and entertain them. They walked up to him. Someone said they saw him in a diner and they walked up to him and talked to him, and he didn't tell them to go away. He was very gracious, and they talked for like 5 or 6 minutes. Cormac liked to travel. He was an active member, really a daily member of the Santa Fe Institute, and would talk to interns. However, where does this reluctance to talk about language and his writing come from? Well, when we look at a lot of his works, especially his nonfiction works, like The Kukule Problem and Whales and Men, which is really just a brain dump by him, we can start to see where all this comes from. And this is from Whales and Men, quote, "What gradually became apparent to me was that language was a thing corrupted by its own success. What had begun as a system for identifying and organizing the phenomena of the world had become a system for replacing those phenomena, for replacing the world. Language was like the evil aliens in the horror movie that take on the forms of things and gradually replace them altogether. Only no one knows. They look like the thing, but they are not the thing. Language usurps things." That is what it does. More and more I began to understand that we were not living in the world as given. We no longer even knew what it was. When you say apple, I hear the word and I see the letters apple, and you say no, the real apple, and I go, oh, ah yes, of course, red, juice, sweet. What we live in is in a linguistic model of the world. We have no way of even knowing what's been lost. And this connects to Jean Baudrillard's, as we see simulacra and simulation over here, and the simulacra is a copy of a copy. And at the base level, a copy of the copy is not like what you're witnessing right now is a simulacra. I at one point was talking into this camera, and now you are witnessing it. But if you take what I'm saying and it changes your day and you treat someone a little bit differently, and then that affects another person and creates this big chain effect, then there's this massive effect that starts to happen. We can't really trace back to the original origin. And with the influx of information today, we've entered into what Baudrillard calls hyper reality, because we can't process or understand the amount of simulacras and everything going on around us. So what Cormac is talking about here is a very postmodernist idea. Obviously, Derrida was really into this idea, especially the idea of we don't even know what is being lost. And how do you process these feelings that these books that you were writing, if you were writing, All the Pretty Horses, that's just a simulacra. And it's a fictional account, so it's like multiple levels of simulacra going on. And I think at some point Cormac felt somewhat ashamed or somewhat weird about it because in the 1960s and 70s, he was much more open to giving interviews and talking about his writing, and he didn't shy away from it. He would say, "It's pretty unconscious. I don't know what I'm doing." But he gave interviews about the Faulkner screenplay he was going to write. I mean, there were, I think, 5, 6, 7 interviews in the span of 6 or 7 years that he did on his writing. And we didn't really get very much good information out of them. But when he started to hang out with Nobel Prize winning scientists and all these biologists and physicists, I think he started to feel inferior. And I think he started to see where language started to crumble and where it didn't really matter. And when you start to experience nature, this also becomes a thing because what McCarthy is doing in his writing is really microing sentences. When you look at his first draft and his second draft, he takes years of revisions to make it what we see, and that's why we like it. And most of us don't have the time, the intellect, or the knowledge of how to do that. And it's the furthest thing away from unconscious. We see these Cormac McCarthy stories and they feel very authentic to us. Like they were these inspired stories. But as I'm sure you know, after you write a poem or a short story and you do a bunch of heavy revisions on it, you're done with it. But how did Cormac feel after 60 years of writing The Passenger, 20 something years of writing Suttree? He was probably feeling beyond burned out. And then to eventually realize that none of it really matters, that science in the long run is going to be way more important than literature, as I've talked about in earlier videos. I think that started to create problems with how he was relating to literature. And he gave an interview once that he said that he doesn't like to talk about writing. He doesn't really talk about it because it's way down the list of things he likes to do. He likes to golf and talk about science and hang out with his son and drive around his truck and travel and all these other things. And writing's down the list. He said that he likes to write because no one else is writing the books that he wants to read. And so there's kind of this moral duty for him to get up and write. And I think this is true for a lot of you guys out there who have a job. If you have a job, especially if you've been doing it for like 10 years, let's say you're an engineer or something like that, and that's you're consumed in it. You probably maybe don't like to talk about that with other people all the time. Like if that's all you talk about at work and you're obsessing over it, and for a while in college, when you're hanging out with other people, you want to talk about other things. You've probably grown, especially since then too. Your career is this, but you have other interests now. I know that could be true. Like I talk about Cormac and David Foster Wallace all the time, and when I'm hanging out with people, like even people who've read them, very rarely ever talk about them because I have so many other interests, and I do this all day. All I do is sit here and read and research and look at posts and try to find all this archaic information. And I've been doing that since I was 15, 16 years old. It's been over 15 years of just doing this almost every single day with whatever author. And so I don't really need it to be my persona outside of my job. And there's a difference between because I'm speaking right now and writing. And obviously, the other big answer, which is kind of like the canonical answer if you ask this question, is that he just didn't like writers. And we've slowly found out that that isn't true. Like we saw him hanging out with Guy Davenport, Edward Abbey. He had correspondences with a bunch of other writers. But obviously, as I kind of talked about at the start of the video, when you're hanging out with academics and it's just kind of dry and there are people talking about your work that aren't creatives themselves and are just slowly killing your work and turning it into further simulacras by just combining it with other theories and not really giving any soul to it, especially through more writing in, the archaic Cormac McCarthy journal, then I think that may be tough. And if let's say you were open, let's say that Cormac was like very open to talking about these things, then he would have to be susceptible to the Blood Meridians bros going up to him and be like, "Bro, who's Judge Holden? Is he really this?" But everyone kind of knows like this guy's not going to answer, so we're just going to leave him alone. If I saw Cormac McCarthy in person, I would respectfully say, "What's up? Thank you for everything." Maybe ask him a specific question about the Southwest or about his life, maybe on that, like one of those dark periods I really want to know about. And then I'd move on. But if I knew he would talk about his writing, I'd be like, "Bro, who the hell was Arthur Ownby inspired by in The Orchard Keeper? Or did you write Outer Dark because you felt guilty about leaving your wife and child?" And from a marketing standpoint, not talking about your work is the greatest thing that you could ever do. I'm literally sitting here talking about Cormac, not talking, and I'm building his brand. You may think I'm building the right conscious brand right now, but I'm really pushing Cormac's career, and so many people have probably bought his books because of my videos. I'm like, okay, you have to read them all, and that's what we're doing here. The persona and the legend is continuing because if we had all the answers, that's why guys like Kashio Ishiguro doesn't really have that big of a fan base because Ishiguro has more readers than McCarthy, than a lot of other authors. He won the Nobel Prize, but he just tells you in interviews what you can figure out what his novels mean. He tells you exactly what's going on. But even people like David Foster Wallace, he actually didn't talk too much about Infinite Jest. There's a lot of unanswered questions in the novel that we have to figure out. I've listened to every single interview by him. And same goes with Cormac. Same goes with like guys like Don DeLillo. They've maybe given out some information, but 90% of it is still left up to us. And that's what I feel like in my own writing career, and I would advise the same thing for you, is don't give away too much. Don't let it's fun to have all the attention on you and to have the right answer. But I remember this story about Harlan Ellison, the famous short story author, and he went to a seminar on his own writing and was sitting in the back. And there was this professor going on for 30 minutes. And then at some point he interrupts it. This is like Harlan Ellison got thrown out of university for punching his creative writing professor for not liking his stuff. And then he sent that professor every single story. He also got accused for like groping a bunch of girls. Anyway, in this story, he sits in the back and then gets up there in front of the crowd and says, this guy has no idea what the hell he's talking about. I'm Harlan Ellison. And maybe that's another fantasy we can all add to our list of walking into a university class where someone's talking about you and just interrupting and being like, no, don't listen to this guy. You can find it out yourself. And that's the whole point of this channel, hopefully. I'm trying to enable people to find the skills, the motivation, give them the framework so that they can interpret McCarthy and other authors in their own way, because that's what it's about. There really are no right answers. I mean, sometimes there are, like Cormac McCarthy, he really wasn't a Christian, everybody. But in terms of who Judge Holden is and who the Triune is in Outer Dark, that could be left up to debate, and we just keep getting deeper and deeper into those answers every single year.